Guten
Hallo.
Abend. Hallo.
Wie geht's?
Wie geht's? We've been doing our German lessons. It's getting close to Talking Tag. How the fuck is it March already? It's crazy.
And we barely know any German.
Yeah.
I know how to order and coffee, so I think I'll be fine. I'll be
Mit
buzzing my tits off.
Mit Kart bitte is
Wein
Wein oder Bier
oder Kaffee?
oder Kaffee.
Tschüss.
I still don't know the Oh, genau. Yeah, genau. Ja, natürlich. And then just walk away. Just that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna ask if I can pay with card, say naturally, and fuck off. And that's all I can really do.
Bomber ist mein Hund.
Yeah. So anyway, hello, welcome back to a drunk history of Middle Earth. It's a pretty solemn episode. It is the last Sauron episode, and I actually made this the last episode rather than doing what I normally do. Get halfway through it and think, "Fuck, this is more than one episode." So this is the end of Sauron's. And do you know, if I did debate doing another episode today and leaving this episode until the 25th of March, which is Sauron's downfall. That's the day of his downfall. It's also the day before my birthday.
Fitting.
Yeah, we're like, what? 9 days out from that, and I just didn't want to wait around.
Was his downfall because he knew you were coming?
That's it, yeah. I think I might actually...
He got told you were going to be born the next day, so he's
That's
like,
it.
right, peace.
That's it, yeah. I'll say there's a new big dick in town. Yeah, so you'll hear from her dulcet tones. Rebecca's back. Hello, Rebecca. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
Good.
Sehr gut.
Sehr good.
Yes, I'm good. And I have been to Egypt, so I'm very, very, very good. And yeah, met Andy Serkis. Amazing.
Yeah, just running.
Just ran into him
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
in Heathrow, Terminal 3.
That's fucking awesome.
Bumped into him.
Yeah. You've been jet setting about, haven't you? You've been here, there, and everywhere. You've been to New York.
I've been to New York and I've been to Egypt.
Yeah, while I've been slaving away over the Sauron series that I feel like I started about a year ago.
Yeah. But I've just been left to look after the child and enjoy all these holidays and work and listen to you on a night slaving away over Sauron.
Yeah,
So,
it's a hard life. It's a hard life. We've just come back today. Actually, we were watching. I'm not a football fan, and Becca isn't a massive one. But we've just come back from watching Newcastle win. Is it Carabao Cup, something like that?
Caribou Cup.
Yeah, it's the first football match like I've watched for a while. So that
in
was,
Wembley,
yeah,
100,000 audience.
crazy.
Amazing though. Thank
Yeah,
goodness.
Not football people.
We've
but,
won something.
Yeah, it's a big kind of.
We're all going to
local
celebrate
area.
with a Greg sausage roll.
It's a big local area thing. Right, let's get on with it. So, what we've covered so far on the podcast, even just the podcast in general, has been leading up to covering Sauron, and then who is the main baddie, and now he is the titular Lord of the Rings. And the last episode we were covering the end of the Second Age, the War of the Last Alliance, where that leads into the Third Age. And it's over 1,000 years between the War of the Last Alliance before Sauron is seen again or heard from again. And that's what we're going to cover today. But funnily enough, today we're actually going to cover about 2,000 years of history.
Nice.
Because the ages of Middle-earth are long. So 3,000 years are in the Third Age, and we don't see Sauron or even hear of him until the year 1050 of the Third Age. So he's defeated at the Last Alliance, which was the last Sauron episode I did. He's defeated at the Last Alliance, and he goes into hiding for 1,000 years.
Recharges his batteries. Yeah. Has a nice facial.
Yeah, exactly. So the year 1050 of the Third Age is when Sauron picks up again, and he's made his way to Dol Guldur, which is in Greenwood the Great, which we know as Mirkwood.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at our lovely map on there, you'll see. And there must have been some kind of indication somewhere, some disturbance in the Force, because It was around the year 1000. This is according to Unfinished Tales. So the year, it's either between the year 1000 and the year 1100. Tolkien gives different dates at different points about when the Astari come, when the wizards arrive in Middle Earth. Unfinished Tales says around the year 1000, and the Astari are specifically sent to Middle Earth to upset Sauron's plans because they don't want to wreck the world like they did with the First Age. Understandable. And there now began, 1,000 years into the Third Age, there now began to be rumblings of his power again, and his influence was felt. And it's generally thought that prior to this and around this time, he had retreated all the way to the east, where so the two blue wizards were tasked with finding his stronghold in the east, and they were never able to do it. So
is this like general knowledge that's being passed down through all kinds of species, or is it just the wizards getting on with it in the background?
What
or
do you
like
mean?
are the hobbits walking around like, oh yeah, that's Sauron, I can, something's brewing?
We're going to come on to that in a second,
Or
actually, because it's around this time. That's a really good point that you've
you know
picked up
how
on.
in the Greek times, like, people be like, oh, it's thunder and lightning,
Yeah, no.
the
So
gods are having a little riffraff up there.
it manifests itself in different ways.
Okay.
Sauron's power, his power is not as direct. It's just how Morgoth tainted the very world itself. Sauron's power is a shadow that stretches over everything. So things start to get weird. And we'll go on to it and you'll see that not everything Sauron does is him directly taking action. It's the act of his power being there and him gathering power.
It's a bit like us with inflation. You kind of, the price of the Freddo goes up.
Yeah, the
up
price
very slowly.
It's like that.
And then in 10 years' time, we're like, oh my God, remember when we were kids and a Freddo was 5p?
Yeah, you realise how bad things are getting. It's like that meme I showed you about goths are the harbinger of financial apocalypses.
And they're coming back round again.
So the goths were popular in the 1980s.
Yeah.
Then they were popular in 2009, 2008, 2009. Now they're
Now they're
popular
coming
again.
back.
So now that means financial ruin's got to be on the cards.
Yeah.
There was also the Goths that the Romans fought as well. That was the harbinger of their downfall. So they're not the cause of it, according to this meme that I saw.
But there's a correlation.
But they are harbingers of it. The Goths are the harbingers of financial ruin. So anyway, funnily enough, right, so there were rumblings of his power around this time, right, the year 1000, 1100, and so on. It's generally thought that he retreated to the east, like I mentioned, but there was an invasion of Easterlings that invaded the Vales of the Anduin in the north, and they invaded around this time. And now what is mind-blowing is that Sauron returning in this form and in this way, and his shadow growing, is possibly directly responsible for the Hobbit founding the Shire. And the reason for this is that in the book series, The Peoples of Middle Earth, there's a book called The History of Middle Earth. It's like a 12-book series. Book 10, I think, maybe, or 12, I don't know. It's called The Peoples of Middle Earth, and in that one is a section called Of Dwarves and Men. And in there is a passage, and in that passage there is a footnote, and the footnote points out that Sauron is the reason for it, but the passage reads, "The vague tradition preserved by the hobbits of the Shire was that they had dwelt once in the lands by a great river, but long ago had left them, i.e. the River Anduin, which runs all the way down, and they found their way through or round high mountains, the Misty Mountains, when they no longer felt at ease in their homes because of the multiplication of the big folk and of a shadow of fear that had fallen on the forest, Sauron settling in Dol Guldur. This evidently reflects the troubles of Gondor in the earlier part of the Third Age. The increase in men was not the normal increase of those with whom they had lived with friendship, but the steady increase of invaders from the east. So it wasn't just men increasing in general, it was more Easterlings being around and invading. And invaders from the east, further south, others were held in check by Gondor, but in the north, beyond the bounds of the kingdom, harassing the older Atanic inhabitants, i.e. Atanic descendants of Numenor and like humans and stuff like that. Atani is,
Yeah.
the old name for humans. And even in places occupying the forests and coming through it into the Anduin Valley. But the shadow of which the tradition spoke of was not solely due to human invasion. Plainly, the hobbits had sensed, even before the wizards and the Eldar had become aware of it, the awakening of Sauron and his occupation of Dol Guldur. And then the footnote says the invasion was no doubt also in great part due to Sauron, for the Easterlings were mostly men of cruel and evil kind, descendants of those who had served and worshipped Sauron before his overthrow at the end of the Second Age. So you were right, like intuitively you picked up on it. They knew what was up long before anyone else, and they moved. But unfortunately for some of the hobbits, they moved to the wrong place because they then settled where the Witch King would go, and then they went. But other ones would eventually settle in Bree, and then found the Shire. So yeah, you're right. Like they do know, like, and that's what I mean. That it manifests in different ways.
Yeah.
So all I can imagine is that around this time, the Valar were like CJ from San Andreas, and they were just like, "Ah, shit, here we go again," and then sent sent the Astari across the sea. But I did find speculation that it might have been. I couldn't really properly source this, but the triggering event for the Astari being sent back to Middle Earth must have been when he started to form his physical body again. That was such a pouring of power that's what tipped the Valar off that he was back, and that's what caused a lot of the stirrings. Because the act of creating an actual physical body is, it takes a lot of power. That's why it took him over 1,000 years to get the strength back to do it. And after Numenor fell, it took him ages again. So he's had to do it like twice, I think, now.
I'd be interested on how they make a body.
I'll read a bit at the end about this because Tolkien did go a little bit into it, but he did specifically call out that it is a physical body. It's not an illusion.
Yeah.
It's not just him wearing like a flesh
That's
cloak.
what makes me more curious.
It is a genuine physical body, and it sounds like that took a lot more effort than most other things. Like the Valar can make themselves appear as humans or elves or whatever, generally much more beautiful, but Sauron made an actual physical body.
Nice.
So who knows? So Sauron chose a hill in southern Mirkwood, and it was called it's Dol Guldur, and it's the highest point in the southeast of Mirkwood in the Highlands. And originally, this hill was called Amon Lanc in Sindarin, which means naked tree. Naked hill, because no trees grow there. And there were no elves there because they'd all migrated north before the last alliance was formed. So the bigger event, like 1,000 years previously, where he was defeated in Mordor by Isildur and Elendil and Gil-galad, the elves had moved further north from even within the forest. Like they consolidated their dwellings.
Yeah.
Which it makes sense because like during World War II, we sent the kids out to the city, like, out of the cities and into the countryside. Like you don't want to put them in. You move out of the way of danger, and that's what the elves had done.
I mean, if they've decimated a space, they're not going to want to live in the decimated space, are they?
Yeah, true.
Take a while for nature to take its course again.
So the shadow of Sauron was felt in the year 1000, but it was in 1050 that Greenwood the Great gets its new name of Mirkwood. And it's that time when it's known. And this entity that was sensed in Mirkwood became known as the Necromancer, and the elves further retreated to the northeast under the leadership of Thranduil, the father of Legolas. And around the year 1100, the Wise, which is Gandalf, Elrond, Saruman, they thought that this necromancer was just one of the Nazgul had returned. They didn't think it was Sauron himself.
Because at that point, he probably just had a cloak.
It was just bad vibes, like
a bit of air with cloak. Didn't have a body.
Well, you'll see. You'll see that Gandalf has to actually go to Dol Guldur. He has to actually visit. Like you forget the scale of things in Middle Earth. Like, it's all fucking huge. Massive, massive scale.
It's a long journey.
Yeah. So things are quite quiet for about 200 years because in the year 1300, we see a marked increase of evil things multiplying again, and this this manifests itself as things like the orcs multiplying in the Misty Mountains, and now they start attacking dwarves. So again, it's not Sauron directly, but it's because of his return and him breeding things and things like that happening that we start to see. There's also so the orcs in the Misty Mountains increase, but there's also an increase in dragons from places like the
Nice.
Withered Heath. And the Withered Heath is there's two arms of the Grey Mountains, and in the lands between those two arms is where the dragons bred.
I want to start a pub called the Withered Heath.
That'd
That
be
sounds
fucking.
amazing,
That's a
doesn't
really
it?
good. That's a really good one. I like that.
It just sounds unctuous.
Yeah, I like
Doesn't
that.
it?
That's a really good pub name. Yeah, there's so many Tolkien inspired pub names. So many. But so we see that the dragons will later become a massive threat to dwarves as well. Like Smaug, probably the biggest threat of the Third Age to
Yeah.
the dwarves, and the orcs in the Misty Mountains. But it's all set in motion by the increase in power and activity from Sauron. And the most notable event around the year 1300 and a little bit, in this period of time from 1300 onwards, is the destruction of the Northern Kingdom, i.e., the Kingdom of Arnor, by the Witch King of Angmar. And he handles the north, and then Sauron's subjects in the east, i.e., the Easterlings, and the south, were the Haradrim. They were attacking Gondor as well. So there was a lot of war at this time, and they were all still trying to destroy Sauron's enemies. And the Witch King was most successful. But there's another event that happens in this period from 1300 onwards. So if we move to the year 1635 of the Third Age, so we're now 600 years later from when he first appears again in the Third Age, there's a plague. And we've mentioned the plague before on this podcast, but this is thought to originate from Sauron, and it comes from the east. And it lasts from 1635 till 1637, but it devastates Gondor and most of the north. Eriador, it's kind of had it broke by the mountains, so the Shire barely feels it, for example. It kind of peters out as it gets further northwest. But it kills almost half the population of Rhovanion, which is like the north where Mirkwood and stuff is. And this comes from the east of Rhovanion, spread by the winds in the winter of 1635.
So it's close to the epicenter.
Yeah, it said it spread on like black winds and stuff like that. And the reason that so many more people die in the north than elsewhere, like in Rhovanion, is because they are less skilled at healing than people in Gondor are. And the overall estimated casualty is in the hundreds of thousands because it kills animals as well. And it severely weakens all of Sauron's enemies. But, and this is the peak evil bastard bit, it also hurts his own ally, like his own subjects. So Easterlings and the Haradrim are also massively weakened. So that's why he wasn't able to just storm in and take over everything at that point.
Yeah.
It's because
It's affected his own.
His own people had died as well. So he waits and he gathers power and he doesn't attack.
And he gets them all multiplying again.
Yeah, exactly. Just get straight fucking.
Yeah.
Just breeding twinks and making it work. Breeding twinks and dropping out into women. That's a disgusting image. Oh, good lord. Gondor is hit with this plague in the year 1636. And the lands of the Calinarthon, i.e. what would become Rohan, is almost completely abandoned because of this. And Osgiliath actually suffers the highest casualties outside of Rhovanion. So Osgiliath, until this point, I think it's actually the capital at this point, gets really fucked up because of it's a big city full of people.
Really
heavily populated,
close together, living quarters, all that
Yep.
muck.
Yep. And
Miasma.
yep, it kills the 26th king of Gondor.
Oh, Lord.
And all of his children.
Oh, my Lord's children.
So this was a king called Telemar, and he had come to the throne only a couple of years previously after his dad was killed by the Corsairs of Umbar. And the Corsairs of Umbar are another historic enemy of Gondor. They were descendants of Black Númenóreans who lived on the coasts, and you can see there they go down towards the south in Umbar there. So they were a big enemy of Gondor. His dad was killed. He goes into the role, A couple of years later, the plague hits. He dies. So yeah, pretty shit. It's also at this time, because of this plague as well, the white tree dies. It withers, and that's why it's dead in Minas Tirith. I'm pretty sure that's the reason, is that it's dead. The white tree just dies. And Telemar and all his kids die, meaning the 27th king is his nephew, which is his Telemar's youngest brother's oldest son. Fucking hell.
Okay. I'm following still.
Is called Tarondor.
Only just.
And the little bit of etymology is that Telemar might translate to silver fire, which is a pretty cool name. Tolkien never explicitly states it, but someone did kind of work it out based on other words. If I've got anything a little bit wrong around Gondor, like don't sweat it too much. There should be a series on the history of Gondor if we get there. But because of this plague, right? Because of everything that happens, the plague dies out, and they're able to heal as many people as they can. But in the year 1640, because of the decimated population and because of just Gondor being weak in general, the guard around Mordor lapses, so they can no longer they can't really fully guard the gates as they need to, and it's no longer watched like it should be. Then there's a bit of a gap of about 300 years. So that was a pretty intense period of time from 13, pretty much like 600 years of pretty bad times in Middle-earth. There's a gap of about 300 more years. And of this whole time, the Witch King is fucking stuff up. He landed in Arnor in the 1300, in the year around the 1300. But in the year 1974 of the Third Age, the Witch King finally destroys the kingdom of Arnor. He overruns Arthedain and takes the city of Fornost, ending. So there used to be Gondor and Arnor, two kingdoms ruled over by a High King. When Elendil founded it, Isildur ruled.
He makes a new Andor, which is a combination of both.
Elendil ruled Arnor. Isildur and his brother Anarion ruled Gondor as joint kings, but Elendil was the High King of both kingdoms. The North one's gone now. It's gone. There's no more North Kingdom because the Witch King's victorious.
Yep.
So
what's the united one called?
I don't know. I think it's just the United Kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor, I think. So that's in the year 1974. And the Witch King then goes dark for 6 years. Because in the year 1980, two big things happen. The first is that the Balrog of Moria appears and kills King Durin VI of the dwarf. And then the very next year, 1981, the Balrog kills Nain the First, or Nain, and the dwarves finally abandon Moria. So it's around this time that, because of, the Balrog is thought to have awoken because of the increase in Sauron's power again. So again, bad shit happening because he's around. The Nazgul, in the year 1980, they all gather in Mordor and start preparing for war. 20 years later, in the year 2000, for those of us who can't count, they attack the city of Minas Ithil, and they take it in the year 2002 of the Third Age. In the year 2001, they fly a fell beast into the tower of Minas Ithil. But what's really weird is that a completely unrelated building falls down. And there's, some people in Gondor say, fell blood can't crack Númenórean stone. It's quite a used phrase. So yeah, in the year 2001 of the Third Age, two fell beasts are flown into the tower of Minas Ithil, and it becomes known as Minas Morgul. And the Witch King of Angmar is hiding in a cave, and he puts out a letter condemning Gondor. Right, I'll give you the actual.
Bad.
Right, in the year 2000, in the year 2000 of the Third Age, they attack Minas Ithil. In the year 2002, they take it.
Was that you just trying to see if I was listening still?
Yeah. But in the year 2002, they capture Minas Ithil. This is where Sauron gets his Palantir from. Do you know the one that he uses when Pippin picks it up?
Yeah.
But what happens now is obviously they've got a full city that they turn into an evil thing full of monsters. But it makes the Gondorians flee the region, which is called Ithilien, which was the Garden of Gondor. It was a beautiful place. And it's just all around fucking awful now. So they flee, they abandon it. But the most significant victory for this, for Sauron, isn't that the Witch King and the Nazgul managed to capture Minas Morgul. It's that the Witch King keeps challenging his enemy, who is the King of Gondor, called Earno. And he keeps calling him a pussy and saying, "Come fight me, bro," right? And eventually, Earno accepts. The first time his steward says, "Don't be fucking stupid." But he keeps, he keeps challenging him, and eventually Earno rides to the gates of Minas Morgul in the year 2050 with a cadre of knights, and he's never seen again. That is in the year 2050 of the Third Age. Now, if you can do some quick maths, the next king is Aragorn, almost 1,000 years later. So the biggest victory for Sauron here is that the line of kings is ended for almost 1,000 years. The stewards try and do the best job they can, but it's pretty fucked up. So 10 years later, we're at the year 2060 now of the Third Age, over 1,000 years since he first appeared in the Third Age at Dol Guldur, they start to suspect, hey, maybe that isn't a Nazgul at Dol Guldur. Maybe it's Sauron. It's only took him 1,000 years, but that's when Gandalf and company start to suspect it's Sauron. So, 3 years later, Gandalf takes it on himself to go to investigate. But Sauron isn't quite ready to reveal himself to Gandalf yet. So he zips himself up and he flees east. Again, he isn't ready for open conflict. He doesn't. He works on like misdirection and people being unsure. So everything goes quiet because he's fled Dol Guldur. And this is known as the Watchful Peace. And quite interestingly, the period ends in the year 2460 when Sauron returns to Mordor, which it's about
for that 300 and something
400 years. Yeah, well, 397 years, yeah.
They're just kind of like uneasy.
It's a watchful peace. Like they're on high alert.
It feels calm.
Yeah, the Nazgul are quiet.
It feels like the calm before the storm.
Yeah, exactly. The Nazgul are quiet in Minas Morgul. It seems like they're holding on as much as they can. Sauron's gone. He's not in Dol Guldur. So they're like, maybe. But interestingly enough, again, I can't help but see the parallels because when the Noldor in the First Age camped outside the gates of Angband, the siege of Angband lasted 400 years as well. And that was a time of relative peace where they were alert to the danger of the big baddie.
Yeah.
They were watching and they were waiting. They knew his base of operations.
Yeah.
And there was a watchful peace of almost 400 years.
That's the ultimate charge time.
Yeah, it must be.
That's the full 100% charge.
It must be because the year 2460, Sauron returns to Mordor and things are going to get a bit wild because while he's been away, the Nazgul have been breeding. There is forced fucking programs. There is a cum quota for everyone in Mordor.
They're all taking the zinc tablets.
Everyone in Mordor is taking Wellman conception supplements, and they have to give a teaspoon a day. That's the quota, a teaspoon a day. And the Nazgul have been breeding Uruks. Now,
oh yeah,
yeah. So Uruk-hai is it's Uruk-hai means orc folk, right? But we all kind of think of it as specifically the ones that Saruman breeds, right?
Yeah.
But what Uruk means is it's just stronger, bigger orcs. The race of Uruks are stronger, bigger orcs. And it's with those that Sauron attacks Ithilien in the year 2475. And here he overruns Osgiliath, and the stone bridge of Osgiliath is broken. Now, they are eventually repelled by the people of Gondor, who are now, if you remember, they've had 400 years of stewards ruling them, not kings. And it's interesting because you might recognize these names, but the people who defend and repel them from Osgiliath is the steward. Is Boromir the First, who is the son of Denethor the First. But Osgiliath is still
Hmm.
abandoned. Now, Boromir the First is such a fierce captain of Gondor that even the Witch King fears him. And he only rules as steward for a short time of about 12 years because he receives a Morgul wound, which weakens and kills him,
Yeah.
just like the one Frodo got.
Frodo
But
gets.
yeah, it's a nice reuse of names. It's pretty fucking
Hmm.
cool. Um, but yeah, 5 years later, so Osgiliath's still abandoned, even though they repel the orcs. They just can't hold it. But 5 years later, orcs begin to now make strongholds in the Misty Mountains again. Like, they're not just there, but now they're there with a purpose. They start to build fortresses. They start to shore up, because what they're trying to do is bar all the passages through the mountains. They want to control the passage through the mountains and into Eriador. And it gives significance to the Council of Elrond, because the dwarves talk about the Beornings, like the descendants of Beorn. They keep the passes open through the mountains and they defend it from orcs now, but they charge tolls. So that's an area of it's an area that's been contested. But it's also at this time, so in the Misty Mountains, lots of orcs activity. They're not just um, making strongholds and barring the passages. There's an influx of orcs into Moria as well. They're now starting to inhabit Moria, and the Balrog seems to be fairly chill about this. But we went over that, I think, in the Balrog episode, where they will always tolerate, because ultimately they all serve Morgoth, even though they might like
Like the
fight against each other.
Urukai.
Yeah, orcs. Well, the orcs are Uruks. Oh well, Uruks are bigger, stronger orcs, but ultimately, because they all serve Morgoth, they've all got that ultimate allegiance. So there's
Mm.
kind of like an uneasy. But I imagine, if any of them got too near the Balrog, it'd fucking burn them.
But nothing nice can live with them in harmony.
Nah, exactly. And I've got some speculation, right? Because these are all big moves on the chessboard for Sauron, right? He's getting things started. I've got some speculation that he got absolutely fucked over at the Battle of the Last Alliance, at the War of the Last Alliance, because his orcs couldn't keep the armies that came from Rivendell. He couldn't keep them moving across the Misty Mountains and then down south to Mordor. I think he's trying to not repeat the mistakes of the past by making sure his orcs have strongholds and stuff that would stop an army coming across the mountains again. If they discover that it is him and he's in Mordor, and they try and get the last alliance together again, the last alliance, then I think, yeah. So for anyone who's been following the Sauron series, I do think that there's a lot of parallels we're noticing as we're going over this, but I think this is also a way to not repeat the mistakes of 2,500 years later. It seems a fair assumption. It's speculation on my part, but it does seem a fair assumption.
So you're saying that the path that Gandalf and those took under the mountains wouldn't be available, and the next route expected would be to go over the Misty Mountains. So
They try to go over it first, and they can't get past the pass of Calanarthon. So
Yeah.
that pass of Calanarthon,
Uh-huh.
they only want to take that over the mountains because the rest of the ways are being watched by orcs, and beyond, like they might attack them, and
Right,
they're
okay.
trying to get over as quick as they can, quietly as they can.
Yeah.
That's why they don't go through one of the routes that the Beornings would hold,
Yeah.
because Aragorn and Gandalf are leading them. And remember, the Fellowship is a quest of secrecy. You don't want to go through large populated checkpoints,
Yeah.
because you might be detained, or the ring might decide to slip off Frodo's finger,
No.
slip off his chain. Sorry, and
I'm
then
sure he has butter on his fingers all
well,
the time.
it might decide to like slip off the chain, and all of a sudden you've got the Beornings who can change into werebears, like big fucking bears, who suddenly decide that they want the
Catching
ring.
it like a piece of salmon.
Exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't want to see Frodo trying to swim away down river with a fucking gigantic bear chasing him. You know. So I'm going to skip through the next few hundred years, because there are things that happen that are indirectly to do with Sauron. So there's things like in the year 2589, Dane the First is killed by a dragon, which again increase in dragon activity because of him. Then in the year 2740, the orcs renew their attack on Eriador. Going to take a little detour and talk about a little nice bit, kind of a nice one. In the year 2747 of the Third Age, Bandobras Took, a hobbit, defeats a band of orcs that come down from Mount Gram. Now, fun fact, Tolkien never said where Mount Gram was, and people have had to interpret it in different ways. It could have been part of the Misty Mountains because of that renewing their attack on Eriador, or it could have been part of the Etten Moors, which is more to the north, where trolls and that live. But the name Gram means fierce or grim in Old English, and there is a real Mount Gram in Albania. But during the battle, Bandobras, and this is, I'm just quoting here, Bandobras, who was large enough to ride a horse, charged at the king of the orcs called Golfimble and knocked off his head with a club. Golfimble's head flew through the air for 100 yards and went down a rabbit hole. It is said that this is how the game of golf was invented. Now,
why was he there in the first place?
Because they attacked the Shire. It's a band of orcs led by a king of the orcs, attacked the Shire, and Bandobras Took fought them off with his hobbits.
All right, okay.
It's one of the only times that we recorded hobbits like going to battle. Yeah. But more interesting is that Fimble, Golfimble, so Fimble means great in Old Norse. But even more interesting than that is that in early drafts of the story, Golfimble, this king of the orcs, was called Fingolfin, who we know as a much, much, much different character. But later, Tolkien was going to try to rewrite The Hobbit in 1960, but never finished it. And in that version, the character had its name changed to Gulfimble. Maybe as a way, because the reason it was Golfimble then Fingolfin was just to call the golf joke. So it might have been a way calling him Gulfimble to take away the golf joke, to elevate it to like because by 1960, obviously Lord of the Rings had already been out. We don't know, but it might have been a way that he was going to rewrite The Hobbit to make it fit much more
croquet
flush.
Findle.
Yeah, croquet.
And that is how croquet was started.
It's just
that's an elevation. Golf to croquet.
Yeah, well, the game of polo was invented by a hobbit with a speech impediment who was he saw his dad decapitated, but he couldn't warn him in time. He was saying, "Polo, polo," and his dad couldn't understand him. He was saying, "Duck, go low, go low."
How do you think of these things?
I don't. We just keep going. Right. So anyway, we skip past there's a war between the dwarves and the orcs, etc., and Smaug coming to Erebor before we then get to the year 2841. Now, I'm skipping past it because the war between the orcs and the dwarves is its own topic, and it is a big topic, and it's something I want to do justice. We're going to skip past Smaug coming to Erebor because it's part of the story of the Hobbit, blah, blah, blah. But we get to the year 2841 of the Third Age. Now, we are getting very close to things we see in the books now. So Thrain the Second. Now, Thrain the Second is son of Thror, but Thrain the Second is also Thorin Oakenshield's father. He sets out from, I think it might be in the Blue Mountains. I can't remember where he is. Might be in the Blue Mountains. But he sets out to revisit Erebor. So the dwarves have fled Erebor, went to where they are. Thorin's dad sets out to revisit his home, but he is pursued by Sauron's servants, and you'll see why. Because 4 years later, in 2845, Thrain II is imprisoned in Dol Guldur, and Sauron regains control of the last dwarven ring of power. That's the last one that wasn't destroyed by dragons. So Sauron got one of his aims that he's been trying since 4,000 or 5,000 years previously now, the middle of the Second Age, I think. They were forged around the year 1600 of the Second Age, so yeah, about 4,000 or 5,000 years later. So it's not till 5 years after that, so we're now at the year 2850, that Gandalf visits Dol Guldur again, but this time he finds Thrain imprisoned there, and he's gone mad. He realizes Sauron is gathering the rings of power to himself and is looking for the One Ring, as well as he's now looking for Isildur's heir. So Gandalf gets the key to Erebor from Thrain before he dies, which is what he gives to Thorin later on in the story. And this sets the stage for the Hobbit story. So the next year, 2851, Gandalf meets with the White Council, urges them to act and to attack Sauron. Unfortunately, there's a sneaky shit at the meeting. Saruman, he overrules Gandalf, says that the One Ring is lost to the sea, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, he's already started searching for the One Ring himself, and he doesn't want to draw attention to that. In the year 2885, so about 30 years later, Sauron manipulates the Haradrim to attack Gondor. So it's starting to ramp up again, right? He's kicking shit into gear. And then it goes quiet for about 50 years or so, almost 50 years. Next time we hear Sauron is in the year 2939, but it's not anything massive. It's just Saruman learns that Sauron is searching the same area of the River Anduin that Saruman is. So this is where Isildur died, and Saruman knew that, but now Sauron knows that as well. So Saruman is probably having a bit of a nippy ass moment because he can't turn to anyone for help. But he's probably just like, oh shit. Because Sauron's now closing in on the ring. In the year 2941, 2942, this is the events of The Hobbit, which I won't go into, but Bilbo finds the ring, meets Gollum, takes the ring back to the Shire, most importantly. 2942 is the year Sauron goes back into Mordor, setting the stage for 9 years later. So we're now in the year 2951. We're just doing a quick speed through now. He declares himself openly. So now 2951, so about 1900 years after he first reappears. Nearly 2,000 years later, he now finally is ready to say, hi, it's me, I'm the problem. And he starts to rebuild Dol Guldur, rebuild Barad-dûr and bring power back to himself. He's starting to openly gather power. So this is where he starts like stealing horses from Rohan, demanding tribute from people, marshalling his armies of the Haradrim, the Easterlings, blah, blah, blah. And in his place, he doesn't want to leave Dol Guldur like empty. It's like, he put a lot of money into it. Well, put a lot of effort into it, sorry. So he sends 3 Nazgul in his place. And now 3 Nazgul sit in Dol Guldur in his stead, and that they rule from there. In the year 2954, so it's like relatively, looking at it from history, like it's pretty interesting how quick it seems, but it's actually like years and years apart. But in the year 2954, Mount Doom bursts into flame again. And for those who were here for the Last Alliance episode, this must have shit up the people of Gondor who knew their history, because the last time Mount Doom flared into fire during the war, like just before the Last Alliance, that was their only warning that Sauron wasn't dead from the Second Age. They were like, "Oh shit!" And then like, from the fall of Numenor, that was it was only when Mount Doom burst into flame they were just like, "Oh shit, he didn't die on Numenor, fuck!" And then he attacked like pretty much straight away. So I imagine that would have scared them. Then the year 3000, not much change, but they do live underwater. Also, Saruman at this time, he uses the Palantir, and this is where he gets caught by Sauron. This is where he gets ensnared. So he's been a sneaky little twat up to now, but then he gets properly caught by Sauron, and he fully betrays the council, tells him everything he knows, and he even though he's already lying to the council, but now he's a full spy for Sauron. 9 years after this, so 3009, Gollum is taken prisoner by Sauron and gets tortured for his knowledge of the ring, revealing the Shire and Baggins. Now, what freaked me out here is that Gollum was imprisoned for 8 years. I never, ever considered that. 8 years.
It's a long time to be tortured, isn't it?
Yeah. So now we're moving. So that was the year 3017, I think. Yeah, it was. 3017. We're now, the next year, 3018, this is the last year and a bit of Sauron's reign in Middle-earth, right? We're coming towards the end now. The War of the Ring kicks off. Sauron has relatively little direct action in this. It's just mainly his servants that are kind of, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not really going to go over the events of the Lord of the Rings because, again, it's mainly his servants and the machinations of what happens there and all the battles and what have you. But it culminates on his last day alive on the 25th of March, 1319 of the Third Age, when the One Ring is destroyed and Sauron is reduced to the meanest, smallest spirit. And he becomes about as powerful as a prickle on the back of your neck when you feel like you're being watched. That's kind of what Sauron's reduced to. And I've got some notes here that, in my opinion, Sauron is now fated. After his downfall, he takes on the original Christian hell, which is to be cut off from the presence of God forever, and the grace and the light. And there's also some speculation by Gandalf that the Nazgul would share their same fate because he says, "Go back to the abyss prepared for your master," which is kind of like, well, who knows? But I did an episode on hell and afterlife in Tolkien. I think you were there for it as well, so you can go listen to that. But Gandalf describes what it's like for Sauron, and he describes it during the last debate they have before they march on the Morannon, which when they go to the Black Gate. But he talks about the ring being destroyed, and Gandalf says, "If it is destroyed, then he will fall, and his fall will be so low that none can foresee his arising ever again, for he will lose the best part of the strength that was native to him in his beginning, and all that was made or begun with that power will crumble, and he will be maimed forever, becoming a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, but cannot again grow or take shape, and so great evil of this world will be removed." And that is what happens. But now to come back to what you said at the beginning. In the letter 200, Tolkien describes how Sauron's body works. He also says in the same letter that when the ring was destroyed, Sauron, remember, so like in Peter Jackson's films, Sauron's an eye and the eye explodes and blah, blah, blah. But in the books, Sauron is a dude sat in a room. When the ring is destroyed, Sauron just fucking dies. He just keels over. His body, he just dies. That's what happens to him, right? And it also explains why Sauron took so long to remake his body. It's because, like I said earlier, it's a real physical body. It's not an illusion projected into your mind. It's not like appearing like something. It is a physical body that had to be made from physical matter. And I'm reading from Tolkien's letter now. It is mythologically supposed that when this shape was real, that is a physical actuality in the physical world, and not a vision transferred from mind to mind, it took some time to build up. It was then destructible like other physical organisms, but that, of course, did not destroy the spirit, nor dismiss it from the world to which it was bound until the end. After the battle with Gil-galad and Elendil, Sauron took a long time to rebuild, longer than he had done after the downfall of Numenor. I suppose because each building up used some of the inherent energy of the spirit, which might be called the will, or the effective link between the indestructible mind and being and the realization of its imagination. The impossibility of rebuilding after the destruction of the ring is sufficiently clear mythologically in the present book. I.e., he's saying, I set the story up the way it is. Now note what Tolkien said about the spirit being bound until the end. Now you'll remember this from our earliest episodes about the Ainu Lindale, and when the universe was created, when they were told, if you go there, you're there until the end. You can't come back out. Only humans can come out of the universe, right? Nobody else can. So Sauron, like all other spirits, like Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, Manwë, Vada, Tulkas, Morgoth, blah, 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 all of them, they are bound inside the universe until the end. There is no way out for them. And it's only humans who have the gift of Iluvatar. We pass beyond the circles of the world when we die. But Sauron, being an angelic spirit, would ordinarily either return to the Valar or recreate his body, right? He'd either, if his physical form was destroyed, he'd probably try and go back west. But He can't do either of these things now. He's rejected Manwë. He's rejected Eru Ilúvatar. He's rejected everything good. And his power is also gone, so he can't rebuild anything. He put his Fëa, his spirit, into his physical forms, which when it was destroyed, chipped away at him bit by bit, and he was diminished every time. Then he put it all into the ring. Now the ring's gone. That's it. His spirit has been destroyed.
Nice.
He transferred the matter, and then the matter was destroyed.
Yeah, that's what I would do, I think.
He-
I mean, it sounds pretty awful being trapped somewhere.
Mhm.
So, yeah, probably do that.
It's awful, but
Yeah.
no, he's not able to do either option when the ring's destroyed. So
Just
he's doomed.
nothingness, great.
No, he doesn't have nothingness. No. He
There's
doesn't have that.
nothingness of nothingness.
No, he's left as the meanest spirit. He's powerless, but he's aware, and he's stuck like that until the end. He can't do anything anymore. He goes from the highest highs to the lowest lows, like the Orgozoid. He just cannot do it. Yeah. So he can't recreate himself because his power's gone, but he can't go back to the Valar because he rejected them. So he's now cut off from light and grace and good and God. He's cut off from everything forever until the end of the universe. And at the end of the universe, who knows what Eru might do? He might just fucking annihilate him, or he might be rehabilitated. You don't know. But he's doomed to wander forever, just a spirit of malice, like Gandalf said. But then Gandalf does go further and talk about it. The realm of Sauron is ended, said Gandalf. The ring-bearer has fulfilled his quest. And then Tolkien describes what happens to Sauron. And as the captains gazed south to the land of Mordor, it seemed to them that, black against the pall of cloud, there rose a huge shape of shadow, impenetrable, lightning-crowned, filling all the sky. Enormous it reared above the world, and stretched out towards them a vast threatening hand, terrible but impotent. For even as it leaned over them, a great wind took it, and it was all blown away and passed, and then a hush fell. And I'm going to sum up Sauron's entire existence in the way that Tolkien summed him up. And Tolkien, for a man who talks and wrote as much as he did, he really succinctly sums up Sauron with just one line. He rose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. And that is a perfect summary, and that is also the end of Sauron.
Beautiful.
With one exception, though. There is one exception. Tolkien started to write a sequel to Lord of the Rings called The New Shadow, and he abandoned it after 16 pages or so because it was really fucking depressing. And that was his reason. He started to write it. He wrote about the long defeat and how it left a sour taste, right? So this book was originally set about 100 years into the reign of Aragorn's son Eldarion. So it was about the year 220 of the Fourth Age. And a cult has begun to grow, which worships Sauron, and they keep referring to the Dark Tree. And the Dark Tree is this belief that evil would always grow regardless of how many times it was chopped down. And I think the way it was going,
Makes
I've seen some
sense.
speculation, that the way it was going is that they wanted to bring Sauron back. Because in this sequel, like already the War of the Ring and stuff is starting to become a story. So there's like gangs of vandals who go around and call themselves orcs in Gondor, like smashing windows and shit. Like they're not actual orcs,
Yeah.
but they say, "Oh, we're the orcs," and
They
do
start sacrificing people.
Well, that would be the way the cult would probably go. But yeah, Tolkien abandoned it because it was too depressing, and it was the long defeat, and thus
It was reminding him too much of life.
Yeah, and then so we got the actual good ending of Sauron actually dying.
Yeah.
Which I prefer. And that's it. My God, we've made it. This is the end of Sauron. There was 9 episodes for a mortal man doomed to die if I had to do a fucking 10th. Like,
have you really done that many episodes?
On Sauron. 9 episodes on Sauron. And I think, I'm pretty sure it's 9, yeah.
Ridiculous.
But it's over. It's over. Send me an eagle because to rescue me from the Mount podcast.
I mean, there might not be anyone listening at this point.
No, they're probably not. I do
They've
wonder.
tuned out.
Some days you do wonder, is it even worth it? Like some days you're just like, fuck me. But I am diminished and will go west because I put all my cruelty, malice, and my will to dominate
Get
all
some
life
of those
into this podcast
zinc
series.
tablets.
Yeah.
Have 400 years to recharge.
I know I need 400. I feel like I need 400 years, but that's it. That's Sauron. We went from the Lord of Names and Titles on the first episode to go over his epithets and everything he does, all the way to the end of the third age. Well, the fourth age, even the abandoned fourth age. It's just, yeah. The Last Alliance was part 8 of Sauron. This is part 9. Our 66th episode.
66th.
66th. 66th episode.
The 66th episode.
66th episode about Sauron, silly, Sally, salacious, slapper. That's it. No, yeah. Do you have any parting words? Anything you want to talk about? Any questions?
Well, I just can't wait for the 96th episode. Or the 69th episode.
69 is just going to be a load of slurping. It's just a slurping into a microphone.
As if that's the 66th episode.
Yep, 3 years.
Oh my lord.
3 years of the podcast, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's crazy.
It's all going very fast, isn't it?
Yeah. Tolkien Tag will be a celebration.
Yeah. I'm hoping to record something there. That'll be quite nice. But no, apart from that, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this series. Let me know if there's anything you want me to do an episode about. I might just actually never do a fucking episode again after this, to be honest.
We'll do a drunk one and then that might
we'll see
perk
how it
you
goes.
up.
Yeah. Right, other than that, hope you're having a wonderful day, making good choices, or not, I don't fucking care. You're an adult. Yeah, goodbye from me, Chris.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Oh.